Implementation Plan Part 3, the Pragmatic Dreamer. I was very inspired by the moonshot video. Um, in the last video, I was talking about just the endless wonder that exists in life and just how being alive is just so thrilling. There's so many things to learn. There's so much to be passionate about. And as a teacher, I find a great deal of passion in this idea of always moving forward and always trying new things. And we have this grandiose vision of what a 21st century classroom could look like. Students up out of their seats, exploring science through their own passions, identifying problems that they are intrigued by, and then exploring those passions through projects and experiments and so forth. I feel very lucky to have been surrounded by a number of like-minded, passionate teachers who really got me into robotics and taught me about teaching physics. And these teachers are people who do the same thing every year. They're trying new things. They build their curriculum year after year, but it just continues to get stronger and evolve because they're always willing to take risks. And that was one of the biggest lessons that I learned from one of my mentors, was that you got to keep trying new things. As soon as you start doing the same thing year after year, you're dead. And so I've always had that mindset ever since I've been teaching. I taught robotics for a year as a long-term sub. Huge learning curve, but that led me to bringing that entire robotics curriculum to a school that didn't have it. And I got recruited. I didn't even have to apply for jobs because I took that risk. And I spent an entire year teaching something that I didn't really even know about and that I was also learning along with the students. I was literally recruited to bring that program to another school, and it was a huge blessing. And after that year, during my first year of fully teaching, really teaching, when I had brought the program to a school, we had a competition, and after the competition, we were invited by a pretty renowned robotics teacher at Stanford University named Ed Carrier, and we were invited to come up to Stanford. So myself and two other robotics teachers, we drove up to Stanford, spent the night planning questions, and we stayed up late planning this interview, and it was amazing. We got to interview Ed Carrier for 2 to 3 hours about robotics, and it was just such a breakthrough moment for me, just seeing what a robotics professor at that level, not just at the collegiate level, but at Stanford, who's been talked about in different books and who has mentored students who have gone on to help develop the iPhone and all these things. And so I got to meet this guy and interview him. And then he brought us into his workshop where all these college students were working on their robots and getting ready for a competition, much like our own classes. And I was just completely blown away by how much his workshop felt like my classroom. And it was kind of a mess. I mean, there's components and tools and stuff all over the place, and there's kids in there 24 hours a day. They take turns going in, and he talked about how he'll go and buy them donuts and some nice NiCad batteries and come in on a Sunday morning, and they all eat donuts together, and the kids are pretty much there around the clock for certain periods of the semester. And so I really took that feeling and that vibe and all the things I learned from that trip, and I brought that into my classroom. And the following years, the last couple years, just spent more and more time in there on the weekends, and my students love to come in on a Saturday, and I love it too. It's super fun. And we come in on Saturday morning. I might bring them donuts sometimes, and they come in and they're working on their robots, and we'll spend 4 or 5 hours in the classroom just working on stuff, and it's just a great time. And so that sounds kind of like I'm dreaming, but that's actually the reality of what my classroom looks like. And so after I start to see what was possible, and reading the personal statements that my robotics students wrote after they took my class, and seeing how um, giving them that freedom, and allowing them to create their own robotic creations really inspired them and changed them, and got them to realize what they were passionate about in a way that my traditional physics classroom just wasn't doing. And as I saw my robotics class pick up steam and really go into this profound learning, I noticed my physics class really not taking off and kind of getting boring, and I kind of found myself doing kind of the same routines that I had been doing, and really not going anywhere with it. And so that was a couple years ago when I started, as mentioned in the video part 2, I just took a huge risk, and I had this mantra of make physics feel like robotics. And I took a lot of risks, and like I said, like not every project really went absolutely perfectly. There was a lot of bumps along the way, but through reflection, I continued to refine some of these processes and find ways to make this more project-based environment. I found ways to help students get the most out of these projects, and that's kind of where I'm at this year, is still keeping that mantra of making physics feel more like robotics, but I feel like I've definitely taken strides this year to help students get more out of these experiences, how to reflect on what they've learned, how to model what they've learned through diagrams and through explanations and so forth. And so I feel like I've really moved in this direction that of a classroom that I would love to see, the ideal classroom. I've moved in that direction in the last couple years, and now I'm at a place where, as I've mentioned, I see myself implementing the Web 2.0 tools to provide better frameworks for students. And so moving forward and being pragmatic about these goals, I still am just sticking to what I originally saw as, make physics feel like robotics. And while this year I've sort of worked towards tightening up procedures, I think I've gotten to a place where I know how to get a bigger bang for the buck, so to speak. And now I want to kind of turn it loose back onto my students again. And I think that is possible through this technology. And it's gonna involve risks. I need to go into next year knowing that not everything's going to work out, and that's okay. That's how we grow. And so I don't want to play it safe next year. I do want to, have a year where I'm really pushing myself and trying new things. And I feel like I can do that in a way where students will definitely still be getting a lot out of these experiences, but at the same time, they see that I'm evolving as well, and I'm there with them. And an example, right now my students in physics are doing a project where almost an entire unit is being taught by them. The unit is called Energy in the Universe, and they are teaching lessons about understanding conservation of energy in a bigger scope. So we did a unit on conservation of energy, just the kind of classical potential energy, kinetic energy, and so on. But now students are doing projects where they're building earthquake simulators, and these things are amazing. They've gone on YouTube, they've reversed engineered these earthquake simulators. They've found parts in my classroom like motors and boxes and wood and whatever they need to build these projects. And so I have them working in groups where they're using Google presentations. They're creating a presentation to teach the class with. In fact, the presentations are starting tomorrow morning. They also had to create a worksheet, a Google Doc, that their students will be using to read about the topic and answer questions, facilitate discussion, and so forth. And then they'll also be using their project, the demonstration. For some groups, it's earthquake simulators. For other groups, it is wind turbines, water turbines. Some groups did use solar panels to make solar energy demonstrations. And so I'm doing these things right now. I have not really implemented the technology from my end, and that's where I'm at. I have not set up structures where I can actively collaborate with students, but I have set up structures where they can collaborate amongst themselves. So I've taken these strides over the last couple of years. I see where this is going, and I want to do more projects like this next year where I have more of a framework set up where I'm facilitating the technology from my end. I can monitor what they're doing. I can assign more detailed tasks. I can offer screencasts that support what they're doing. And a lot of these things that I feel like are lacking a little bit still in my class are a starting point for next year. So that's where I see myself going next year, is really envisioning a totally different type of classroom. It typically takes me half the year, 3/4 of the year, to sort of condition these ninth graders to think this way and to be independent enough to do this kind of project. And I'm really excited to see what they come up with and to see how it feels for them to be leading the classroom and them to be teaching the other students and even teaching myself about these topics that I have not taught them about in a direct instruction environment. So next year I really want to just shoot for the moon and get my students doing these kind of projects earlier in the year. First semester, the freshmen come in kind of bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and it takes some time to really condition them to understand the culture of our school, but I think they're ready for it. And I think if I've put these more structured frameworks into place, I think students will bite down on it. And just in closing here, I think one skill that I really want to work on that I think will go a long way has to do with empathy and teaching students how to see from other perspectives and how to understand that people are different, and taking that a little further, really being able to provide feedback. A problem I've seen this year is we'll do a project, students will create like a poster that models what they learned, and then I have them do sort of a gallery walk where they walk around and provide feedback to each other. And I find that this is incredibly difficult for ninth graders to do. Their feedback is very weak, and I need to model it better perhaps, but I want to really get them doing that earlier next year and really push their thinking to think critically and to look at poster that their peers have made and go in and really think about how it could be better. Not just feedback like, oh, you could have colored this more, or you could have made this written more clearly, but I want them to really take a look at it and say, well, what essential concepts are missing in this poster? How could this really pop and teach something on a higher level. And I look forward to doing it. So it's been great. Thank you.